Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
It's Rutgers week. How do you think it's going? It's going awesome.
The answer is, it's Rutgers week. How do you freaking think it's going? Or however you New Jersey people talk.
They played at the Penn State game on Saturday. They played, do you remember the song "Teach Me How to Dougie"?
I
10 years ago?
Yes.
And this week, I don't know why, the combination of that and the fact that it's Rutgers week, I have just had "Teach Me How to Rutger," teach me how to Rutger in my head all week. And now you do too, and you're welcome. So there you go.
I'm almost tempted to restart the show just so we don't put that ear poison into our listeners' brains. Like we're bad enough as it is. We shouldn't also then try to injure them.
It was like, okay, well, that song was bad. How can I make it worse? Aha. I have 3 words for you. Just add Rutgers.
Well, Tom, we better get started on this show because I read a review that we have too much banter. So how about silence instead? Let's just go complete silence. But no, let's just get ready. Let's just start the show. I don't want to make one more person angry at us, even if it alienates everybody else. So that's fine. But today, Tom, we talked to Ryan Day, offensive coordinator Kevin Wilson, and defensive coordinator Kerry Coombs. And, just some recapping of the Penn State thing, what went well, what didn't go well, what maybe looked better after the fact, and then a little bit of previewing of Rutgers. And Tom, one of the the Swallows returning to Capistrano, one of the Rutgers themes every year is, gosh, Ryan, how do you maintain focus for Rutgers? And it's this just backhanded, like, you're going to win. So how do you keep your players focused from just assuming and just bothering even having to play this terrible Rutgers team? And one of the things that Ryan Day said is basically they're striving for greatness and they're not there yet. And that's what they're shooting for. And it was kind of like last year where it's, gosh, Ryan, how are you going to keep your team focused? And it was always, there's a standard to uphold. And we have to meet that standard against every team, regardless of how good or bad they are. But at least this Rutgers team, the Buckeyes have seen them win, which I don't know if they've ever seen that before.
Yeah, this is a Rutgers team that has at least a little bit of a pulse, and it has a transitive win over Michigan, so that's a mark in their favor. Yeah, this like the answer to that question always reminds me of the if you're a good golfer and you're playing with bad golfers, it's like, well, I'm just playing against the course. I'm not playing against the other people I'm playing. Like if you have someone who's like a 5 handicap and you're playing with someone who's like I don't know what my handicap would be, but I'm sure it's like a 40. If you're playing, it's no fun to play against the other person. So you're kind of playing against the golf course and playing against the standard that you want to hold yourself to. That's where Ohio State is this week. It's like there's no drama in the result, but they can use this as a step towards where they want to get ultimately, because eventually you are going to play teams that are at least comparably talented, like when the talent equates, as Ryan Day said last year. So, they are going to have a few of these this year. You've got Rutgers, you've got Maryland, you got Illinois, you've got, Michigan State, no matter what Michigan made them look like, there are going to be a few of these coming up. And, as long as they can, sort of maintain that focus, they should be able to kind of make the most of them.
And we'll talk about Rutgers more later in the week, but it's this balance of striving for greatness while also playing backups to get them experience for a year where you have no idea what's going to happen, as we saw again today, as Wisconsin has canceled another game as their outbreak continues. It's 15 players, 12 staff members at this point have contracted COVID, and so they have canceled their game with Purdue. And we'll see if they're able to play next week or the week after that. But Tom, let's talk about maybe the biggest news is Cam Brown injured his Achilles in the Penn State game. And we talked about it after the game saying like, well, we don't know what it is, but this is what it sure looks like. And that's what it ended up being. And So then there was talk about, well, who do they put in there? Who do they replace him with? Ryan Day did say Legend Cavazos may be coming back here shortly, which would be good. Like you said, Ryan Watts would have to step up, and Cameron Martinez, their other freshman, and also there's mention of Tyreek Johnson. I thought it was interesting talking to Kerry Coombs. Somebody asked him, hey, like, what does Tyreek Johnson do well? What does he maybe not do so well? And Combs is like, well, the conversations about what players need to do better are conversations that stay between the coach and the player. And we'll leave it at that. But Tyreek Johnson sure prepares hard. And Tom, if your grade card, like your report card or your job performance is prepares hard, and that's like maybe the best thing that somebody is willing to say about you, I'm guessing the other side of the ledger has much more written on it. Like,
yeah, that's a perfect attendance award. I mean, he prepares hard and knows the playbook and all that stuff. Like all of the things that they talked about were effort and preparation and the mental side of the game. There was not a lot of conversation about, the on-field stuff and, plays well in coverage, great tackler. Like, and, again, this is maybe us reading a little too much into it, but it was a little, it was a little jarring to not hear a whole heck of a lot when you get asked a question like that. And, he has not played a lot. He has not been a real regular part of that rotation. And if they don't feel like the on-field portion of it is there for him yet, then, that may be why. And this is his third year in the program. So, his career is not over yet by any means, but, you are getting to the point where I think this spring, before the spring started, I wrote a piece that was kind of like the guys who this was going to be a really big spring for them, and in terms of like the trajectory of their career. And then there was no spring. So that was probably not great for him, but if you're going to do it, you need to start doing it pretty soon.
Yeah. And we'll see. This is an opportunity this week and next week, frankly, for everybody to get more experience in that role. And in the role that we're talking about, Cam Brown would come in nickel situations and help out in the slot. He also would play some outside, I believe, as well. And so those are situations I think Day, or I think it was Day that said maybe Marcus Williamson will play a little bit more outside at times. Then we saw Josh Proctor getting involved in the slot and Lathan Ransom as well. And one of the things Kerry Coombs said is what he's been telling his entire defensive backs room, like, you need to be versatile this year and you need to be prepared to play and you need to be ready for next man up, because they could be getting ready for the game that day and find out the guy in front of you is not going to play, as happened this past weekend with Justin Hilliard, who had the positive test, and then the PCR confirmed that it was negative, and yet because of Big Ten rules, he couldn't play. And that could happen at any position, and that's what the defensive backs have been preparing for. And then it kind of happened with Cam Brown going down, and now maybe positions you're not accustomed to playing, you're going to have to play, and you're going to have to figure it out. And Josh Proctor, I think, is going to play more and more in many roles, although Marcus Hooker apparently played really well and graded out a champion, as did Proctor against Penn State. But the more you can do, the better, especially as one guy goes down. And then you've got Lathan Ransom in there as a true freshman who also came in, which allows Proctor to do other things. He won't just be locked into one thing. And man, it's one of those years, I guess this year being different than any other, where, you came here to play Ohio State. You came here to Ohio State to play safety, but we need you here. We need you here. And we're also going to have you over here. And if you put up any kind of roadblocks, then you're not going to play, because that's not the culture. That's not the attitude. And the hungrier and the more ready to embrace any of these roles, the better off each of these players is going to be. And I assume I would be very surprised if some players were like, yeah, that's not me.
But I mean, the power dynamic of college football has always been the when I say jump, you say how high. And that's, there's all sorts of stuff that goes into that. But This year, I think that's even more important that guys, I think, know, look, you just got to figure it out. Like everything about this year is like, yeah, we just got to figure it out. Like the games are on the schedule. And if we get to play them, we all have to, this has been Ryan Day's mantra all along is everyone's dealing with the same thing. We have to deal with it better than whoever we're playing. And, this week that was there's no practice on Tuesday because of election day, and that kind of throws them out of whack for the week. And, Ryan Day, I think, wasn't a huge fan of that. And he said basically all the guys in the team have already voted. So it wasn't, this wasn't like they're all standing online at the polls this morning, ready to cast their ballots. Like they've all pretty much voted already. So, but that there's no practice today. So that screws up the normal traditional practice week. But he said, we have to do a better job of dealing with that than Rutgers does. Everyone is dealing with that this week. It's a 1 week problem. We have to do it better than Rutgers does. And then that's fine. That's everything. That's the crowd noise, the weirdness of playing in the empty stadiums, all of that. Like it's how they're going to deal with it. And in this instance, it's, well, everyone's going to have these weird things. Everyone's going to have someone test positive or a false positive or injuries. I mean, like a normal season, like it's just all of the next man up stuff is ratcheted up this year. And however guys have to, however they're going to solve those problems, however guys are going to fill that next man up role, just, how high.
Well, Tom, I do need to correct you on one thing, especially this week being Rutgers week. In Ohio, again, Tom, we stand in line.
Well, I'll tell you what, I will take diction lessons from people in Ohio when they start using to be. Like, the car needs washed. No, friends, the car needs to be washed. So as soon as everyone starts saying to be, we will accept constructive criticism on our personal lexicon. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
It's implied. Those words are implied. It's like in Spanish, when you don't need to say yo, you can just use the proper verbiage of that conjugation. It's the same here in Ohio. And if I run into you or we were both going in the same doorway and I say, oh, that's universal, like, pardon me. But I'm not saying pardon me. It's just, oh, and that's understood. And again, Tom, in Ohio, especially Rutgers week, of all weeks, it's inline, not online. Online is what we're doing, how we're recording. Inline is standing somewhere and whatever you do, Tom, I swear, especially on this day, election day in America, if you were to say, people are queuing, I will come through this screen right now because queuing is European and we are American.
we fought a war 200 some years ago to not have to queue. So yes. Yeah. So anyway, that's
banter.
Yes. Yeah. Say 2 stars, must improve.
So let's talk about the crowd noise because Ryan Day didn't like it. And you're talking about Beaver Stadium with nobody in it. And yet on TV, Tom, it was very loud. I don't know how loud it was. What was it like there then with the crowd noise?
It kind of hard to say because you're in the closed up press box. The windows are closed, so it's all a little muffled. And unlike Ohio Stadium week 1, Ohio State week 1, we could at least go outside before the game and get a sense for it. Penn State was all the media people are just you go out, you walk in, you go up the elevator, you walk off the elevator in the press box. And then 8 hours later, you get back on that elevator and you go back down and you leave. And that was it. Like you couldn't leave. You were hermetically sealed in the press box. So it wasn't super loud to me, but I'm on the other side of a piece of glass, and so you don't really know. But I mean, he talked about the fact that it's 90 decibels, and unless the center is like standing over the ball, it can be 90 decibels the whole time. And I'm sure Penn State had it at not 1/10 of a decibel lower than 90 at any point when Ohio State was trying to do anything. So, and he said, with only assistant coaches and grad assistants being able to be on headsets, it's real hard to communicate with people when it's that loud and you got that sound echoing off of all those hard surfaces. You don't have people there to sort of absorb the sound. It's like being in a concrete room. Like it's just going to echo off all those hard surfaces of all those seats. So, yeah, it sounds like that was more of a challenge than maybe you anticipated, but probably still not as much of a challenge as it would have been if you had, 107,000 people there screaming their heads off.
Yeah, it's certainly a different challenge because the loudest part is when coaches are trying to communicate with each other. And he said, well, just turn like whatever is in your living room, turn it up to 90 decibels and then try to communicate through a mask. And you'll find that it's not easy at all. But they were appreciative of that lack of crowd noise when it came to the pass blocking. So I bet you give and take, and they'll be quite pleased with the outcome. Tom, let's talk about some of the running game. Day said he liked how hard the running backs ran the ball, but also using Garrett Wilson in that jet sweep allowed them to get to the perimeter, which he kind of implied they didn't really have because J.K. Dobbins is gone. But they had J.K. Dobbins in 2018 when they were running that jet sweep with Paris Campbell. I think maybe part of the issue is KJ Hill wasn't really he's not the guy that does that. Last year, so that wasn't really part of the offense. But now you've got Garrett Wilson, you've got Jackson Smith and Jigba, you've got even Mookie Cooper, who maybe we'll get to see him this week. But they have guys that can do that. But also it does give them something on the edges that they haven't really had yet. Although we saw more of that this past week with Master Teague, and I think that was good to see. And it really feels to me like the running game is just getting started. And we didn't expect a huge game against Penn State just because that's a very talented game, very, very talented team, front four. This week, I'm sure they'll do fine. And we probably shouldn't make too much of it because it's Rutgers. But if they struggle, then I think that means something.
Yeah, I guess the question is, what is Rutgers going to try and stop? Because Rutgers, I think, knows they can't stop everything. Can Rutgers stop anything is the next question. And, maybe this is a better team than it was last year. There's more actual Big Ten caliber players on this team. There are not Ohio State caliber players on this team by and large, but they're Big Ten caliber players. There are former Buckeyes, Malik Barrow, Brendan White, Mike Dwumfor from Michigan. There are players from other Big Ten schools that are going to be on this defense. So, it's going to be at least a little bit interesting. And like you said, if they run for 6.5 yards a carry, I don't know how excited Ohio State fans should really be. They should do that. Mm-hmm. Now, if Rutgers really keys on stopping the run and they only run for 4 yards a carry, I don't know if that's necessarily time to push the panic button. They may this may be a little bit like a rehab start for a pitcher who goes down to the minor leagues. And it's I just really want to work on my curveball, and I'm not going to worry about, the results against this AA team. I'm just going to work on my curveball and throwing that for strikes. Ohio State may just be trying to work on certain concepts or just put some stuff on film for other teams to have to worry about later and not necessarily be all that worried about the results at every single moment of the game, because the result is largely preordained, I think, this week in a lot of ways. So it may be a game where the game ends up a lot closer than it probably should, just in a purely objective reading of the talent levels of the two teams, because Ohio State is going to not necessarily solely be going for point maximization.
What if they flea flicker every single snap just to put it on film and get other teams thinking, this is now a flea flicker offense, we better prepare for it. How do we handle this? And because you only really see 2 max in a game and generally none. And now you're throwing 60 of them, 40 of them. That's something that Maryland would have to respect that the next week and prepare for that.
Than just a regular dive play is your trick play. Whoa, he kept it. Whoa. No, I personally would look at this as a chance to run the all hook and lateral offense. I think that's where the real the real possibilities are this weekend. I would watch with pretty great interest if they decided they're going to run at least 10 hook and laterals this weekend. Sure, absolutely, I would watch the heck out of that.
I want to see one play where it's a bunch of hook and laterals, but at some point they get the ball to Wyatt Davis, who then just throws it over behind his head, a la Rutgers, in honor of the Scarlet Knights and their near miraculous touchdown against the Hoosiers that still would not have gotten them close enough to win the game, but it was fun. It was neat. The reviews on the corners were pretty okay from Day and Kerry Coombs both. Day said, you got to give Jahan Dotson credit, which is what we said. Combs said Dotson kind of pushed off on that second one on his touchdown catch. But again, then he said, but that's neither here nor there, even though he said it, but then it's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I don't want to say that it was a result of a penalty. I'm not saying that it was a result of a penalty. I mean, he pushed off, but I'm not saying that he pushed off.
I'm just saying, basically. And Combs did say they some of those in-breaking routes were, a little, no, I wouldn't say problematic, but they do need to clean that stuff up. I thought Ross did a great job. Ross Fulton did a great job on the morning scoop today, breaking that down. And that's kind of what I was seeing as well, because Ross initially said like the first half RPOs he was reading the same side of the field for that receiver. And then the second half, it was the opposite. And that's where they were getting in front of Seven Banks. And it's just an interesting thought process of like, you have to have faith that corner is going to stay off because you're reading it pre-snap. And really, I think Kerry Coombs and Ryan Day, they both said that at third and fourth quarter, they're just playing back and trying to keep everybody in front of them. And that's when you're doing the RPOs and you're playing off. I mean, that's free yards, but it's only like 12 free yards. And then they have to do it again and again and again. And a lot of these RPOs, at least 3 of them, were just out of the reach of the linebackers. And so, 250 some yards passing in the second half, 150 in the fourth quarter. I don't get too hung up on it, but it was good to hear from the coaches that the corners were relatively fine. It was more just a product of the defensive system.
Yeah, when they don't sound super worried about it, they are looking for things to worry about and looking for things to go back to the team and say, like, this is something we got to get fixed. And a lot of times they will communicate that to the team through the media. So when they come and tell you they are not really worried about something, that's probably a pretty good indication they're not really worried about something. When they're worried about something, I mean, Ryan Day, when he was asked about Cameron Brown today, said, this is a position where we really couldn't afford to lose someone. So, they are not, he's not going to just, throw some sunshine on everything. He's going to, if there's a concern, if there's an issue, they'll tell you. But they sure did not, neither Day nor Kerry Coombs seemed particularly troubled by that. It was just kind of like, well, you got to tip your cap to Jahan Dotson, and he made a couple of great plays. And then, they were playing off a little bit, and they gave up the plays they were expecting to give up, because when you're up by 2-3 scores in the second half, go ahead. Like, I mean, that's basically what Michigan State did to Michigan at the end of the game. Like, go ahead, take the short throws, make them all day. By doing that, you are hurting your chances of winning, even as you're moving the ball down the field, because you're taking too much time, because there's time is kind of the most important thing at that point. So yeah, they really, neither of them seemed particularly troubled by it, which should probably make Ohio State fans feel a little better.
Yeah, Kerry Coombs, his quote was, "I have no worries about Shaun Wade." And he almost took offense at one point about, I don't know if it was maybe it was Seven Banks, about, some bad plays. And he was basically like, there were no, I wouldn't characterize anything as bad. It's just the nature of sometimes players make plays, and Dotson did that, and other guys did that as well. So you give them credit and move on. And, you watch it in film and you try to fix any of the issues they have, which is what's going on right now. Although not today, since it's a day off, but you get the idea. The defensive line, Day was very happy with it, as you would expect. Tommy Togiai, Haskell Garrett, the ability to run through so many guys. I asked him about Jonathan Cooper, and he said it was just good to see somebody with that block having that kind of impact in that game. And I would agree with him, because we've been waiting for this from Cooper, and he said he's kind of been waiting for it. And even Day said, like, this is a guy who fought so hard for this season, and you could see that out there in this game. I'll probably write about it here in the next day or so. But that entire game, that was one of the bright spots for me, is just seeing how much of an impact Jonathan Cooper was finally able to, and I don't want to say finally, because he's had other impacts, but this was a big game to do it. And he took offense a little bit to just having 5 tackles and half a sack. And he was like, that's all they gave me. And he was way more than that. And Day said as much today too.
Yeah, Jonathan Cooper is, I mean, we've talked about the guys who are kind of real easy to root for on this year's team. And Jonathan Cooper is right at the top of that list. You think about what he went through last year to, essentially give up the Big Ten championship game, give up the college football playoff as a trade-off to come back for this year. And then for it to then look like, oh, now you're not going to get this year, to now have it back and now be able to sort of capitalize on it. Him, Justin Hilliard, who, I mean, we just talked about earlier with the false positive test, you feel really bad for him. And, you hope he can get back on the field. And boy, this weekend, it would make me really, really, the thing I would be rooting for this weekend would be Cameron Babb scoring a touchdown against Rutgers. That would be, I don't know if that'll happen. That would be, those are 3 guys who have just had careers that, they came in with real high expectations, and just stuff has not gone right for them. And it's not a lack of, it's not a lack of talent. It's not a lack of production. It's just off-field stuff, injury stuff. Like that's just, it just people who have caught some bad breaks. So yeah, those are 3 guys who I think, you would love to see some good stuff happen for all 3 of those guys this season. And I mean, Saturday at Penn State, like that was like the Jonathan Cooper show for a long stretch of time. And between him and Tommy Togiai and Haskell Garrett, like all of a sudden, I mean, we came into the year saying that defensive line, especially the interior defensive line, was kind of the big concern. Feels like they've answered some of those questions with Ron Vincent coming back. Like it's like, okay, now it's no longer the worst case scenario. Now it's like, okay. And now you can feel free to spend all your energy fretting about the cornerback situation instead.
We also talked with Kevin Wilson, and every time we talk to Kevin Wilson, the lack of catches for his tight ends, that entire subject comes up. And today it was regarding recruiting and how do you convince guys to come here when they're not going to catch the ball. And he's always kind of annoyed by it because, as he always says, there's more to playing tight end than catching the ball. And I think he said, people only care about the tight ends when they catch or drop pass. And it's like, well, that's at Ohio State. You might be very right about that because there is more attention paid to the dropped passes, going back to even Ryan Hamby, than any catches. But he did mention tight ends had 117 snaps against Penn State. He mentioned like just showing recruits clips of practice and everything that goes into playing the position. And the way they're playing the tight ends, again, we weren't sure how much 2 tight end sets we'd see this year. They're still playing them quite a bit because it continues to be effective, and not just effective with the running game, but allowing them to throw downfield. You can have some max protect. You can have Rucker in the passing routes as well. And then, as Ryan Day said, now teams will start to adjust. And so maybe we'll see less of the 2 tight end stuff, or you do stuff off of that. But really, this offense right now, there's really nothing they can't do. And now it'll be interesting to watch to see what they do as defenses try to stop what's worked so far.
Yeah, because the interesting thing with the Ohio State team this year is you can do the 2 tight end thing, and you've got two guys, Farrell and Ruckert, you put them out there. You've got 2 legitimate receiving threats. You split Ruckert out into the slot. There's a bunch you can do there. But by doing that, you're taking potentially one of your wide receivers off the field. And with as deep as a wide receiver unit is, I don't know if they want to do that all the time. So if teams are adjusting to, putting personnel packages out there where they're planning on facing two tight end personnel a lot, if you don't do that, you have the option of not doing that a week. That's not something you have to do. It's just something you can do. So you're giving teams 2 very, very different looks to prepare for, even if it's, even kind of the same, you could run the same basic plays, and just with a different personnel, that changes a lot what the defense has to do, who the defense has to put on you, and all of that. So it just relatively basic changes for Ohio State result in pretty significant changes and schematic issues potentially for opposing defenses.
And one last thing before we get out of here, Blake Haubeil, who had a groin issue, Ryan Day said it's basically a day-to-day thing, and they will treat it as such and get other guys prepared to play, including the freshman, Tom, and his name?
Jake Siebert.
I even wrote it down. I mean, I literally took all of the notes. And yeah, so Jake Siebert, who was, people weren't sure if he was going to be a gray shirt or whatever. He's been on the roster all year long. And of course, this is a free year, so why not get him out there? Probably was not part of the travel squad. I don't know if he was or not last week, but we saw Dominic DiMaccio, the walk-on, getting some extra point action, missed a field goal, did the kickoffs. But we'll see how that goes. It's going to be, like I said, a day-to-day thing. But for as bad as things went, they could sure use him in terms of the special teams, in terms of the red zone, which Ohio State scored 3 touchdowns on 6 trips. Ryan Day wasn't super unhappy with how things went because there was a misconnection to Garrett Wilson on the fade that he said broke his heart. But and then at the end they weren't really necessarily trying to score touchdowns, so it's okay. But you hate to see the 2 missed field goals in there. Tom, I know you hate to see 2 field goals attempted in there, regardless of the make or the miss.
Yeah, 4th and 2 is not kicking time. That's not what that's for. You have an offensive line that you can pick up 2 yards. It's okay. Yeah, that's and Day does a very good job. He is aggressive in a lot of times that most coaches would not be. But yeah, there are times that it's like, I don't know if I'd send the kicker out right now. You could pick this up, and 7 points would be, you're not necessarily worried about scoring a touchdown. But if you did score a touchdown, you wouldn't give it back. You wouldn't say no. Like, you could go ahead and do that. It would be okay.
But he does apologize for touchdowns. So, but this would be an opportunity to be like, you know what? Our first kicker was down. We're onto our walk on, and really, we didn't have the confidence. We didn't have that package in there for that guy, and so we had to go ahead and play offense.
So you're saying that he would say that he did it because he couldn't go for 3.
Tom, on that note, we're just going to go ahead and end it because nothing better could be said than what you've just said, especially this week of all weeks, Rutgers week. So we'll go ahead and wrap up now and end it there. Tom, thank you for joining the show.
Always a pleasure to be on.
I'm listening to the Morning Scoop too often, I guess. And now I'm just thanking people for being on the show, even though it's also your show, but people know that. Again, Tom, sorry about the banter, everybody. We've got to go. So thank you all for listening. Make sure to check out this morning's Morning Scoop if you haven't with Ross Fulton. It gives you a lot of insights into, again, why things maybe weren't so bad as maybe a lot of people thought coming out of that game. A game, by the way, that Ohio State won by 2 scores on the road against Penn State. So, you should never be happy about winning at Penn State ever, and you shouldn't be unhappy about it. So thank you all for listening. Make sure to check out BuckeyeScoop.com where there is tons of stuff going on. Alex Gleitman just dropped some stuff about some final predictions on some 2022 commits coming up this week. Derek Davis and Benji Gosnell, the tight end. And there's all kinds of stuff going on right now on the Ask the Insiders board. So check that out. If you're not yet a member, as Tom says, just make coffee at home twice a month. And it's like a free website. So check us out there. And thank you all for listening. And we'll see you guys later.